For many years, Thor had been confined behind those cold metal bars, watching as people passed by his small cage. Their faces lit up with joy when they chose playful puppies, signing papers amid excited voices and wagging tails as the dogs left with their new families. Yet, no one stopped for him. He had nearly lost all hope until one day, everything changed. A couple paused in front of his enclosure, their eyes meeting his directly. At first, he thought they were like the others, curious but uninterested. Then, to his surprise, they pointed at him. The shelter attendant nodded, papers were signed, and suddenly, he realized he was going home. But what happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. Thor had lost track of time in that place, where days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, and months stretched into an eternity. In the beginning, whenever visitors arrived in the adoption area, he would leap up, wag his tail, and press his muzzle against the bars, desperately hoping this would be his day. But it never came. He watched as litter after litter of energetic pups, small breeds, and even some older dogs were chosen before him. He tried everything to catch their attention, barking with enthusiasm like the young ones or sitting with pleading eyes, begging for a scrap of affection. Nothing worked. Gradually, he stopped trying, barely lifting his head as people walked by. The shelter was a noisy, chaotic world of constant barking, the sharp scent of disinfectant hanging in the air, and cold concrete floors that never warmed. Volunteers came and went, feeding the animals, cleaning the kennels, and occasionally taking them for short walks. Yet, Thor never felt free. His cage was just large enough to turn around in, with a food bowl that was always full but offered tasteless, joyless meals. The only warmth he knew was from a rare pat behind the ears by a staff member. At night, when the barks finally faded and the lights dimmed, he would recall a distant memory of a real home, a cozy bed, a yard to run in, and someone who loved him. It all felt like a fading dream. Then, one afternoon, a shift occurred. Thor was curled in his usual corner, head on his paws, when he noticed movement outside his cage. A man and a woman stood there, not glancing away as most did. They lingered, watching him intently. Thor raised his head slightly, but didn't move. They whispered to the attendant, who nodded and unlocked the door, a sound Thor hadn't heard in ages. A leash was slipped around his neck, and a gentle voice called his name. For the first time in what seemed forever, he stepped into the world beyond. The air outside was utterly different, fresh and overwhelming after years of confined scents and sounds. The leash hung loosely as the attendant led him toward the exit, his paws hesitating on the cool tile floor. He'd been out before, for brief yard walks, only to return to his tiny prison. But this felt different. As he passed the other kennels, dogs barked or whimpered, their eyes following enviously. He walked down a long hallway to glass doors, where sunlight poured onto the sidewalk and a warm breeze rustled the trees. Waiting there was the couple, the man with papers in hand, the woman smiling softly as she knelt down. Thor paused, unsure. The attendant handed the leash to the man, who spoke calmly. "It's okay, buddy." The woman extended her hand for him to sniff, her scent a mix of lavender and something comforting, like home. She whispered, "You're coming to our house." That word, house, stirred something deep within him. Papers finalized, Thor left the shelter behind. The world outside seemed vast, the sun warming his fur, Cars humming by, birds singing. It was all more intense than he remembered. They approached a car, and the woman opened the back door, gesturing for him to enter. Thor hesitated, his body tensing at the memory of a painful car ride that had brought him to the shelter. Noticing his fear, the man knelt beside him, stroking him gently. "It's all right, friend." Seeing the kindness in his eyes, Thor slowly climbed in. As the engine started and they drove away, he rested his head on his paws, allowing himself, for the first time in years, to hope that things might be different. The ride was quiet, with Thor settling into the seat, his breathing steady amid the rhythmic hum of the road. Anna, the woman, glanced back with a soft smile. "Look how calm he is." Joao, the man, replied a bit uncertainly. "It's a lot of change all at once." As the city gave way to quieter streets lined with trees and spacious yards, the car finally stopped. Birds chirped in the distance as Joao attached the leash and said, "Let's go, big guy. Time for home." Stepping out onto soft grass, Thor took in his new surroundings. A welcoming house with a wooden porch, flowers blooming nearby, and the earthy scent of freshly cut lawn. Anna knelt, holding the leash loosely. "You're safe. Take your time." They didn't rush him. They let him set the pace. As he crossed the threshold, a wave of unfamiliar aromas filled the air. Warm wood, clean laundry, and a hint of something sweet, perhaps a meal cooking. Inside, the house was cozy, with soft furniture, a warm rug, and a dog bed in the corner. Thor approached the bed hesitantly, unused to having a space of his own. Anna patted it gently, inviting him, but he chose to lie near the sofa instead, feeling safer on the floor. She reached out to stroke his back, and he relaxed into her touch, a sigh escaping him. It had been so long since anyone had shown him such care. In the days that followed, Thor moved cautiously, exploring the corners and sounds of his new life. Anna and Joao gave him space, speaking in gentle tones and moving slowly, understanding that trust takes time. He ate and drank when alone, freezing at approaching footsteps, haunted by memories of dogs returned to the shelter. But one evening, in the soft glow of lamplight, with the TV murmuring in the background, Thor inched closer to Anna. She didn't react abruptly. She simply waited. Finally, he rested his head against the sofa, and for the first time in years, he let himself relax. As weeks passed, subtle changes emerged. Thor began to wander more freely, his steps growing bolder. He wasn't fully healed, but in the quiet acceptance of his new family, he started to believe that this home might be forever. He began to eat while they were still in the room, instead of waiting for them to leave. And his tail, once tucked tightly between his legs, started to show a slight wag as he walked. Then came a great transformation. One morning, John fitted a leash on Thor and led him outside. It was a warm day, with a soft blue sky scattered with wisps of white cloud. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, and birds sang from the trees in the quiet neighborhood. Anna watched from the porch as John guided Thor toward the park just down the street. He moved cautiously, still uncertain and hesitant, but he was trying, and that was what truly mattered. At the park, John led Thor to a wide-open lawn, far from the small playground where children were playing. It was a quiet, open space where Thor could finally breathe. John knelt beside him and for a moment unclipped the leash. Thor stood frozen, staring out at the vast field. The last time he'd been untethered, it had ended in abandonment, in a frantic chase after someone who never looked back. John didn't rush him. He simply sat on the grass, watching and waiting. Then something flickered in Thor's mind. A memory of running in a yard, of the wind in his fur, and the sound of laughter as he chased a ball. His paws stretched, his muscles remembered how it felt to move without restraint, and suddenly, he ran. The air rushed past him, his tail wagging higher than it had in years. From the porch, Anna let out a soft gasp, covering her mouth with her hands, while John smiled gently. Thor started running in circles, slowly at first, then with more confidence. When John called his name, he didn't hesitate. He ran right to him, stopping just in front, panting, but happy. John reached out and scratched behind his ears, murmuring, "Good boy." Thor leaned his head into John's hand and closed his eyes, surrendering completely to the gentle affection. As the seasons changed, the days grew cooler, and the air took on the crisp scent of autumn leaves, and the house, once so foreign, had transformed. It had become his home. Thor no longer hesitated at the doorway, nor did he flinch when John or Anna approached to pet him. His tail, once stiff and uncertain, now wagged with genuine joy. He learned the rhythm of his new home, the quiet mornings when Anna had her coffee by the window, and the evenings when John settled by the fireplace with a book. He discovered that the doorbell was not a sound to fear, and that when Anna knelt with her arms open wide, he could curl up against her without fear of rejection. Above all, Thor learned what it meant to belong. On a night that brought the first chill of winter, Thor lay near the sofa, his head resting close to John's feet. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. Anna, curled up in a blanket, looked at Thor with a tender smile. "Can you believe how much he's changed?" she asked. John nodded, stroking Thor's back. "He just needed time," he said. Thor let out a deep sigh, his body completely relaxed. The old fears had faded, and the cold, hard floors of the shelter were just a distant memory. He was no longer the forgotten dog behind metal bars. He was home. And as he drifted off to sleep, his last thought was not of loss or loneliness, but of warmth, safety, and love. For the first time in a very long time, he wasn't waiting for a home. He was already in one. Thor's story reminds us that every dog deserves a second chance. There are countless dogs just like him, waiting behind metal bars, hoping someone will look past their age and their scars and see all the love they still have to give. If this story has touched your heart, consider supporting your local animal shelter by adopting, fostering, donating, or simply spreading the word. And if you enjoyed this journey, share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to change a life forever.